All right, so now we're going to actually talk about the digestion process and the different steps in it. So the first step when you are eating food is to actually eat the food, to ingest it. So we're going to say ingestion is our first step, which is eating, putting the food in your mouth. And so when you put the food in your mouth, our teeth are going to be the first thing that begin mechanical breakdown or chewing of our food. Then we also have in our mouth salivary glands. All right, and these are going to begin chemical digestion by releasing enzymes that start digesting starches, which are like sugary foods or things like bread, crackers, stuff like that. And so here, if we're just looking at our picture, our food's going to go in our mouth. Our teeth are going to begin to chew it up. So like mechanically break it down, physically break it down. And then we also have these salivary glands that are going to produce our saliva. And our saliva helps bind our food by getting it wet, sticking it together. It also has enzymes, which we're going to talk a lot about actually next class. But those are things that help break down food into smaller parts. And then we also have things in our saliva that help kill bacteria, pathogens, stuff like that. Anyway, so that's the first step, is actually eating the food. Now, the next step is going to be called, or what we're going to call propulsion, which is going to be moving our food along. All right, and this is going to happen several places throughout our GI tract. So, like I said, the next few steps kind of all can happen at similar times. So, propulsion is actually moving our food through the GI tract. And so we're going to first swallow our food. All right, so the swallowing of the bolus, which is our chewed food, so we're going to have it go down our esophagus. So that's the next kind of part in our picture. Here's our esophagus. We're going to swallow, propel the food down, and it continues with involuntary peristalsis, which what that basically means is that our muscles are going to go through a contraction and relaxation to move our food. So what peristalsis is contraction and relaxation of smooth muscle in esophagus, stomach, and intestines to move the food through our canal or throughout our entire digestive process. So you'll notice that when you are swallowing, like after you do that swallowing motion up here, then you don't ever think about your food. Like you can't really control how it's moving or going because it's controlled by smooth muscle, which means it's something we can't control. Our brain and our nerves control that. And so it's just going to, as it goes through this process of going down our esophagus, eventually into our stomach and then through our intestines, we aren't going to control that, but it is going to be pushed along by contracting and relaxing of our muscles. And I can show you kind of a video of what that looks like, but basically as one side of your muscle contracts and the other side relaxes, it pushes the food forward. Then you'll have another section contract and another section relax, and it will continue to just push it through your whole body. All right, the next part is what we're going to say is mechanical breakdown. All right, so we're going to actually start breaking down our food. Mechanical breakdown is a physical breakdown. So similar to how our teeth, like we said, our teeth do mechanical digestion because our teeth are, moving up and down, crushing our food, breaking it into smaller pieces physically. We also are going to do that in other places throughout our body. So we are going to physically break down food to increase the surface area and mix it with enzymes. So other places where we might see this is like in our stomach. As our stomach churns or our stomach contracts and relaxes, we're going to begin mechanically breaking down or physically breaking down our food. And so that's another place where we see this mechanical breakdown. And this is important because, like it says, we need to increase the surface area. So we need to create, instead of having these big pieces of food, we need really small pieces of food. So then when it mixes with our enzymes in our body, it can be broken down even further in a quicker amount of time. And so the next step that works in relation with mechanical breakdown is called chemical breakdown. And in chemical breakdown, we're going to have secreted or enzymes that have been produced. So produced enzymes are going to chemically break down the food molecules into their simplest forms so they can be absorbed into blood, transported, and used by cells. So when we get them into small enough pieces, then these enzymes can actually break it down even further, kind of like dissolving our food, I guess you could think of it that way, into really tiny forms so that they could then be absorbed into our blood, transported, and used in our cells. So again, if we're thinking about like protein that you need in your muscles, it comes down into your stomach as a piece of meat. We're going to try to physically break it down further, start some chemical breakdown in your stomach, and then as we go into your small intestines, we're really going to have lots of those enzymes in your small intestines working to chemically break it into really small parts, so that then in your enzyme or in your small intestines, they're actually going to start being absorbed into your bloodstream to go throughout the rest of your body to where your muscles need those small pieces of the proteins that have been broken down into even smaller parts. You'll notice another thing just on this image up here is we have things like the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas, which are all places where food doesn't actually travel, but they're important in our digestive system because they produce things like enzymes and bile into our digestive system. So they release it and it goes into our stomach, it goes into our small intestines, and those enzymes then break things down further. So just know that's kind of where these chemicals or these enzymes come from, is from other parts in our body that then are secreted and put into our intestines and our stomach. All right, step 5 is our absorption step. All right, so we're going to actually have to absorb our food so that it can provide nutrition for us. And so it's going to be the transport of molecules through the walls of the GI tract into the blood to be used in our body processes. So once we break it down into these really, really small pieces, then they can just be absorbed right across, the small intestines into the blood vessels that are surrounding the small intestines to then be transported around the rest of our body. So that's the absorption step. And you'll notice that mainly is happening in our small intestines. It also will happen in our large intestines, but it will be things mainly like water and stuff that's absorbed. Lots of it mainly happens in small intestines, but large intestines also could play a role in it. And then our final step that you probably are familiar with in the digestive system is defecation step. So it's actually the process of getting the parts of our food that we can't use in our body out of our body. And so it's going to be the elimination of indigestible substances through the anus as feces. And so down here, our rectum and our anus is going to store and then discard the waste. And so that is the process your food goes through. Hopefully you can do the homework. There are some homework questions that kind of require you to think a little bit that is not necessarily exactly like copying down on the notes. For example, I can't remember the exact question, but I think there's one that asks about how the structure of the small intestines helps it with its function. So for example, in the small intestine is where we break down food chemically and we absorb our food. The structure of the small intestine, you'll notice it's pretty thin and it also is pretty long. And so because it is thin and long, it gives our body time to absorb everything that it needs to absorb as it moves through the small intestine. If the small intestine was really short and thick, if it was too thick, we couldn't even absorb anything. And if it was really short, then we wouldn't have enough time as the food moves through to absorb all the good things that our body needs to absorb from the food. All right, so that's just one example. I think you have another one on your homework that's kind of similar to that. So anyways, hopefully it kind of gets you thinking about the digestive system. But as always, if you're stuck on some of the homework problems, I can help you guys once you get back. So just leave those blank, try to do the ones that you do know, and ask questions when you get back. All right, good luck.